Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is out in theaters now. This is going to be my spoiler filled review for Frozen Empire. If you have yet to see it, I have a spoiler free review. You can check that out at the end of this video. You can fast forward to it if you want. The link will be there at the end of this video for all those that have seen Frozen Empire. Stay tuned and buckle in for the ride, because this is going to be my spoiler filled review. I feel like there's not really too much to talk about in a Ghostbusters movie, but there are some things that I wanted to talk about that I just wanted to get off my chest. I don't think this is going to be one where I break it up into topics like I usually do. It might be. So you might be able to go to what you want to hear about in a certain topic. It's definitely a mixed bag for me, but I definitely think it is still a solid enough entry into the Ghostbusters franchise, even if it feels like there's not much that happens in this movie, honestly. One thing that I do like is bringing back Walter Peck, played by William Atherton. There's this chase scene early on in the movie where the Ghostbusters, the Spengler family at least, because now they're in New York thanks to Winston Zeddemore. Winston is the man. Ernie Hudson never gets enough credit as a Ghostbuster. He opened the firehouse. Now they're like primary financial contact, and they're chasing a ghost through the streets, and Walter Peck is pissed off because Phoebe is a minor, and he thinks that she shouldn't be part of the Ghostbusters team, and he's finally enacting his revenge. He wants the Ghostbusters finished, so he's trying to get his revenge on them by trying to have them finished. There's so many different things at play here. You have that whole thing with Walter Peck. You have Phoebe feeling like she's not being treated as an adult, rather she's being treated as a kid. She doesn't like being on the sidelines. She has this interesting relationship with this ghost named Melody. This ghost named Melody is actually working for the main ghost, Garaka. Garaka wants to freeze all of New York City in a frozen hell and unleash all the spirits from the containment unit. Then you have Kumail Nanjiani's character, Nadim. He's the fire starter, and what he's got going on with Garaka as well, how he came into the possession of this orb. Then you have all the stuff with Phoebe podcast and Dan Aykroyd. And then you have all the stuff with Winston, where you have all these different labs that they've created. There's so many moving parts to this movie that it just seems like it lacks a lot of focus. And while I think some of this stuff is good ideas, they don't really harken home a lot of these ideas to their full potential. Some of them they do. I think the whole Phoebe feeling like she's being treated like a child rather than an adult, even though she is only 15 years old. I think that that's actually probably the heart and soul of the movie, as well as the family dynamic with the Spengler family. I've said that already. I love that Gary Gruberson comes back, and he's essentially like, do they call me dad? Do they call me stepdad? I don't really know what my role here is. You gotta help me out here. So I thought that he was funny. I just thought that a lot of what transpired was convenience for convenience's sake. So let me talk about Kumail Nanjiani for a minute. He plays a guy named Nadim. The way that Garaka comes into the story is that Nadim, he's selling a bunch of family heirlooms to Ray, and one of them just happens to be this giant orb. And Garaka is in prison in this orb. This man has had this orb for years on end. It just felt like a convenient way to bring the ghost into the movie. The explanation for him being the fire master and the whole background with Garaka, I just didn't really buy all that much. It just felt like a lazy way to explain how he comes into the movie, who Garaka is, what he wants. What's interesting about this whole scene with the ancient artifacts from Nadim when he gives them to Ray is that there's a huge exposition dump here where you learn about Garaka and this ancient society of fire masters that apparently Nadim's grandmother was a part of, and these fire masters deemed to keep Garaka imprisoned inside this giant ball. And so Garaka is imprisoned inside that giant ball. And apparently he removed it from his grandmother's old secret compartment in her old apartment, and that awakened Garaka, but it's not enough to actually unleash Garaka. Like, he's not strong enough to come out yet. That was interesting, to say the least. And who he's manipulating, because we got to talk about Melody for a minute. So Melody is this ghost that interacts with Phoebe throughout much of the entire runtime. And Melody is essentially the middleman. I shouldn't say the middleman, but she's essentially the one who is out on the front lines for Garaka. She's essentially his contact point, I guess you could say, and She wants to cross. She's a spirit that hasn't really crossed over to the other side, but she wants to cross over to the other side so that she can finish her unfinished business. But it turns out she's just a pawn in Garaka's game. All's Melody wants is to see the beloved spirits of her family, but she doesn't really realize that Garaka tricked her. So in the final battle, Phoebe has to be the one to convince Melody that Garaka has tricked her. One thing that I thought was actually really interesting was the dynamic between Melody and Phoebe. I kind of looked at it as Phoebe, this was like her first crush. I thought that that's maybe where they were going with it, but I wasn't 100% sure because there's a point in the movie where Phoebe actually becomes a ghost at some point. She doesn't die, but she becomes a ghost. That happens when Phoebe turns into a ghost. That's actually a ploy by Melody to have Phoebe chant this chant that unleashes Garaka so that she can interact with Melody. And that's where I thought that that was kind of going. I was like, oh, this is going to be like Phoebe's first crush. This is going to be her first girlfriend or something, which I'm fine with. But it actually didn't go down that route. And that was kind of surprising. It felt like that in the script that was there, but it felt like that they were too afraid to actually do that. But that could just be me. That whole dynamic was actually interesting when Phoebe first shows up in the park with a chess set and she's playing chess, and then you see an invisible force moving pieces for the other side of the chess set. For a minute I went, oh, Egon! But I'm like, no, I don't think they would do Egon again. And then this ghost pops up and it's Melody. It mostly works. It's just I don't really like Melody's role in Garaka's whole plan here. But I do like that she has this little tick. She has this matchbox because apparently this matchbox is connected to her death, something to do with fire. And because Nadim is the fire master, he's the one that is destined to take out Garaka. So what I like about that is that she has a change of heart towards the end. She lights a match, she gives it to Nadim, who is the fire master, and it gives him the strength and the flame of fire that he needs to defeat Garaka. I thought that that was actually a cool way for Melody to redeem herself. That really works for me. And I thought what was really cool is that Garaka is such a powerful villain that their proton packs, the streams coming out of the proton streams, weren't enough to take him out. He could easily freeze those. He could counteract those beams. And I love that the old Ghostbusters and Janine Melnitz and the new Ghostbusters team up with her and they reconfigure the containment trap in the firehouse to act, or the containment unit, I should say, to act as a new ghost trap for Garaka. That was a really, really interesting idea. I liked that a lot. I liked a lot of the third act, honestly. Everything with Garaka and freezing the city, how he's defeated, and how the Ghostbusters can't just conventionally defeat him with a proton pack. Really interesting stuff. I just think it takes too long to get to Garaka and to get to the frozen city. I understand that most Ghostbusters villains, they don't show up until the last third of the movie, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that for Garaka, but even freezing New York City was too late, too late into the movie. I think if there were hints that New York City was being frozen throughout the entire movie, I could have bought it more and I could have found a little bit more enjoyment. What I think this movie really lacks in the middle is a signature chase scene or a signature action scene. Yes, I get it that all these movies are essentially slow build-ups, but I thought that this one was way too slow. There wasn't really anything to make it seem like we were progressing towards something. That's what I was kind of hinting at in my spoiler-free review, because in the original Ghostbusters, you had the hotel ghost. In the second one, you have the courtroom scene with the ghost. In Afterlife, you have the whole chase through the small Oklahoma town with Muncher. This one, they kind of hint at something with this lion statue. You see it in the trailer, and I was like, that's going to be really cool, but then they don't really do anything much with it. And everything that this movie's trying to focus on, there's so many moving parts. As I said at the beginning of this video, that there's just way too much concentration on some things. I liked that Ray was in it a lot more. I think that his role in the movie, his relationship to Phoebe, him working with podcast, loved all that. Ernie Hudson back as Winston, second most screen time. I thought his role was interesting, how he was the one who funded and set up all these labs. The one who felt like he didn't want to be here was Bill Murray, because he's in like two scenes. He's in one scene in the middle and then the entire final act. And you could tell he just doesn't want anything to do with Ghostbusters anymore, but he was really good when he was on screen. I wouldn't say that he's cynical towards it. I just don't think he just wants to make any more of these. Like, I think he enjoys the experience, but I just think he's done at this point. What I really don't understand is, okay, like, I like Lucky, I like Podcast. Do they really have to be here though? Like, do I really buy that Lucky moved to New York from from that small town in Oklahoma? Do I really buy that Podcast did too? I mean, I like them as characters. I'm not complaining, because I mean, I think if you're gonna focus on a new generation of Ghostbusters, it's gonna be Phoebe, Trevor, Lucky, and Podcast. Maybe Callie and Gary Gruberson mixed in there as well. That was also more plot convenience. It's like, well, we have beloved characters from Afterlife. How do we bring them in here? I don't know. Let's just have Lucky working in one of these labs or something. And let's just have Podcast randomly here. Do they even explain why Podcast is here? I forget. It's just, it's so forgettable, honestly. It's just proof that there's just too many cooks in the kitchen here. There's something that happens at the beginning of the movie that I feel like hints towards, and I could be speaking out of my ass, or I could be completely right, and I just didn't really understand the significance of that, which I don't know how if I didn't, because it's so straightforward. But that there were Ghostbusters in like the early 1900s in the firehouse, and they were fighting this ghost, and somehow this ghost is related to Garaka, or it is Garaka or something, and I completely may have missed that. I went to the Alamo Draft House, so it was, I got like food in front of me, trying to pay attention while I eat at the same time, so that could have been me missing out on that part of the movie. But it was a really cool intro that I just felt like didn't have enough payoff, or any payoff whatsoever. And one thing from the original Ghostbusters movie that I found funny is that Walter Peck loses again. He has to voice his public support of the Ghostbusters. He's the mayor of New York. He hates the Ghostbusters, but man, did that guy age? I don't think he aged. I mean, maybe just the hair, but William Atherton still looks the same as he did in the original Ghostbusters. So there's just a couple of things in here that I think prevent this movie from being as good as it could have been. It was slightly disappointing, but I think that that's really all I have to talk about with Frozen Empire. There's just a few elements that feel like conveniences, a few things that just didn't necessarily work for me in terms of Camille Nanjiani's character, the character of Melody, stuff with Garaka, and just some pacing issues. I think there just needed to be another small chase scene somewhere in the middle. Not saying that this had to be a huge, full blown action movie, because I know that that's not what Ghostbusters is, but I just think that having scenes like that in the middle of these movies, especially where scenes like that were in the middle of these previous three movies, it just splits it up a little bit more. And it gives you something to look forward to when you go to rewatch them. It'd be like every time I watch Afterlife, I'm like, yes, this is where the chase with Muncher happens. It's not a terrible movie. I still find enjoyment mostly in it. I think it's just because I really like these characters. I like some of the themes that it touches upon, especially with Phoebe and her grappling with growing up, and or whether or not she's still a child and all that, and some of the dynamics between the families and some of the other characters. There's just too much happening here, I think, that prevents this movie from being as good as it could be, and my least favorite of the four Ghostbusters movies. It's better than 2016, though, as I said in my previous review. So, those are my spoiler thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Let me know what you think of it. What was your favorite part of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, actually? Since this is a spoiler review, you can just name them all down here, or your least favorite part. Let me know in the comments section below. I'll leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I'll see you at the movies somewhere.